Well, I'm excited about this particular session. I'm Sean Peterson, Senior Vice President, Legal Government Affairs for NIADA. I gotta set this up just very briefly, and then we'll introduce our panelists, let them introduce themselves. I received a telephone call from one of our great dealer members in North Carolina about 3 months ago or so, and said, hey, I've got a question. I am doing battle with one of my finance companies because they think that this consumer has defrauded them and in turn defrauded me, and they want to hold me responsible for it. Consumer filled out a bad credit application, made all kinds of misrepresentations. What do? I don't want to pay the bank back. I had no idea. I mean, everything was legit. Well, that's what we're going to hear talk about, some of that sort of stuff. So with that framework, I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, tell you who they're with, what they do, and we'll jump right in and start getting into it. Shilpa.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shilpa Pope. I'm with DCID, or Dealer Cats ID. I'm the president, and we do authentication for any government-issued documentation, so driver's licenses, identification cards, passports, you name it. We authenticate your end user or your customer.
My name is Les Cravens. I'm the Director of Law Enforcement and Policy for Auto Data Direct. I am retired from Miami-Dade Police after 31 years, 25 of it assigned to a multi-agency auto theft task force.
Good morning. I'm Bob Grill with Carfax. I'm the Senior Partner Development Manager with them. Joined Carfax 7 years ago after 27 years in automotive retail.
And good morning, I'm Jeff Broadsley. I'm the CEO of Chosen Payments, a credit card processing company that is dominant in this space. So we'll talk a little bit about the credit card side of things as well.
So you have one job, two jobs. You have to listen, but you also have to participate. Questions are freely welcome at any time, right? We want this to be as interactive as we can, because I think this is something that's really happening in the dealerships. We frame this, the title of the session, Combating the New Age of Consumer Fraud. You know, we think of fraud in a lot of contexts, and certainly regulators, from my view, think position fraud as something that dealers do towards consumers, but they don't give much thought to what happens the other way. Is there fraud happening to the dealer by consumers? Absolutely, and that's what we want to talk about today. So, Shilpa, let me start with you. What is it that we're really talking about? If I was to ask you that, help frame this issue, what have you seen as you've gone across the country and worked with dealers?
So fraud is a very broad topic. Coming from the retail space, the biggest fraud that we see is identity theft, which is first level of synthetic fraud. Somebody who is pretending to be somebody else, put their face on a document that they've created, and presenting somebody else's information to obtain credit. Now, that could be in the auto side of things, presenting a check in the service department, anything that involves an exchange of money. I also believe that fraud is somebody who's not only presenting themselves to be somebody else, but then get in a car and test drive that car with somebody else who is your employee and potentially steal that car off the lot. So there's different levels of fraud. Not only is it identity theft, it's also merchant services fraud. It's also presenting themselves to go on a test drive and possibly kicking your salesperson out of the car and stealing that car. There's different levels to fraud, but the first level I see is presenting the identity for somebody else who's really not that person.
Les, what have you seen?
Well, to expand on that, I think that it's even gone a step further with synthetic Social Security numbers, and what we mean by that is the customer is showing you their real driver's license, but they've created a second Social Security number, and they've actually established a little credit under it, maybe linked it to somebody with better credit to boost the beacon score, and then they're buying it using that synthetic Social Security number. And then the finance company's finding out about that 2, 3, 4 weeks later, and then forcing you to buy it back. So they're definitely on the rise. The one thing you all need to understand that the days of stealing a car with a screwdriver and dent puller are long gone. Smart ignitions have caused criminal element to find ways to get cars with the keys. And how do you do that? You go to dealers and somehow obtain it fraudulently. So it's just going to get more and more cars go to the salvage yards that use keys. More and more new cars come out with smart ignitions. The thieves are going to have to target you guys more and more than they do today. It's just going to get worse.
So we've got the perspective of what may happen in the F&I department, what may happen in the service department, the consumer-facing transaction element, this idea of consumers, using digital means to get in and swipe cars. How about you, Bob? What are some other things that you might see as common fact patterns in this whole fraud concept?
It's common knowledge for a person's identity, right? And we steal that. Well, it's true of the car too. A VIN number is truly an identity. We partnered up with an initiative. We're currently partnered with over 5,000 police precincts to take care of things such as VIN cloning and stolen vehicles and those kind of things. And to your point about the screwdriver and the dent puller, it used to be turning an odometer back with a drill was easy to do, and everyone thought it'd be more difficult with digital. Quite frankly, it's easier and faster with a digital speedometer. So, from the car itself, just like a person, a car has an identity, and there's ways you can monitor that identity along its history path. There's red flags you can do, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just the whole point is, just like a person, a car has an ID also.
All right, Jeff, we know that there's all kinds of fraud in the credit card world. What does that look like in relationship to the dealership?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different types of fraud. So there's like friendly fraud, which would be, an internal employee potentially, doing fraud with one of their friends, family, or whatnot, stealing their card and then doing a chargeback later. There's friendly fraud where somebody might buy a car or have something in parts and service and then claim that they really didn't get it. And then there's true fraud, which is identity theft. And then there's kind of cyber liability fraud as well. To speak to the internet style things, there's a lot of data breaches going on. So credit card data is what runs the world at this point. It's kind of a cashless society. So there's so much fraud out there, and I think we'll get into it. I think the best ways are to protect yourself from that happening, and then once it does happen, what do you do to protect yourself once it happens? But it's happening in various ways.
Does anybody feel overwhelmed that, holy cow, how do I protect myself? What do I do? How am I going to manage this? Anybody had any instances of that happening in the dealership?
We've had two instances. We had one guy come in. He wanted to go start the car. Maybe he wanted to test drive. Yeah, he wants to start it up. Comes back in and gives us the keys back. Well, the keys he gave us looked like the keys that we gave him, but they weren't the keys. So he then had the keys. Well, we caught it because we were going to move the car, luckily, and then we staked it out and caught it. But and the other one was kind of an Ocean's 11 thing. So we had a customer who wanted to buy a Mercedes Vegas.
Nice Vegas reference.
Fifth Third, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was $50,000 Mercedes. The guy had a 780 score, had everything, license, job. We even verified the job. And he had it set up so when we called, they verified the job. It was great. I think he had it all set. But we delivered the car, Fifth Third bought it, no money down. By the time we figured out it was fraud, the car was in Africa. And they went to Illinois, someone gave them a fake title, they bought it from New York, shipped it, gone. Then that Fifth Third comes to us and says, you owe us. And we'll be customer Fifth Third, we followed them. We ended up paying $40,000.
So this fact pattern is, there's a lot of issues I think that are some things we can dissect, and let's use that fact pattern, panelists, if we can, to kind of maybe run through some of these questions. So what would you advise in this fact pattern for the dealership to do after the fraud is detected? Shilpa, do you want to start?
Sure. I think the I'll take it a step back a little bit. So going forward, I think the first step, and again, coming from the retail side, I used to be a finance director for some large dealer groups and a lot of dealerships, and we've had similar things happen. And I think the first step is really authenticating your customer. So your contract with Fifth Third or Bank of America or U.S. Bank or any bank, it specifically states that you are required to authenticate and verify your customers. Now, most people don't understand what that really means. They think, okay, I'm going to get their identification, I'm going to get their social security number, they're going to fill out a credit application, I'm going to verify every single point on that application. However, and then I'm going to run them through the ID verification, I'm going to run them through the red flags, I might even do some out-of-wallet questions, which is what the standard dealership practice has been for decades. However, that's still not enough. So really authenticating and verifying or validating your customer starts from their driver's license. If you had known that that driver's license was real or fake in the beginning, you could have probably stopped and prevented all of that. Now, not having the right tools in your store or in any of these stores available to you is kind of to your detriment. And so now at the end of that, when you fast forward and your bank is asking you for all of the documentation and you're providing all of the documentation and you find out it's a fraud, well, what do? You try to dissect everything. You try to figure out what went wrong, what's the pattern. I look at the bureau, find out all of the information. Then, of course, your bank rep is going to say, hey, what did you do to authenticate and validate your client? And you're going to say, well, I went through all of these questions, I did all of this, and it's going to boil down to, well, you didn't do enough, Mr. Dealer or Mrs. Dealer or whomever. So, yes?
What tool were you speaking of to verify the driver's license?
So there's authentication tools out there that allow you to authenticate and validate a driver's license that tells you whether that driver's license is real or fake.
Go ahead.
Okay.
We had the same problem 3 weeks ago.
We didn't authenticate it, we after the fact we authenticated, and it would have shown up as a real driver's license. They applied for it, it wouldn't matter. That wouldn't apply. We have other ways to get it.
So let's take this question here. What are some of the tools that are out there?
So there's tools. So there's authentication tools. So, you know, the company that I represent, we authenticate and verify using a mobile app or using web. And it authenticates and verifies driver's licenses through biometrics, facial recognition. You can verify that customer's face by taking a selfie. If you have an off-site delivery, you can verify who you're delivering the vehicle to. You can, through forensic layering, you get to authenticate that driver's license to see if that document was tampered with in any shape or fashion. If that picture was, if it's my driver's license, but you know, you represented your picture on my driver's license with all my information, you're going to pass every single red flag. You're going to pass the ID verification, and you're going to pass the out-of-wallet questions because you know my personal information that's posted on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. Everything is there. So that's why we have a tool that allows you to take it from step one in knowing your customer. It's not the end-all be-all solution, but it's step one in knowing your customer.
Does that tool you're speaking of been authenticated to the person? Is it been covered under some type of like that person, so that it's all they handle the responsibility?
We do not handle the responsibility. This is a tool, so it's a step in knowing. So if you know, it's going to give you a pass or fail. So if it gives you a fail and you know that that customer is fraudulently representing themselves as somebody else, then you as a dealer at that point would then have to contact the local authorities. And, you know, we've got my panelist right here who can explain what the next step would be.
Preventive-wise,
You- So I'll ask you guys all an open-ended question. Who is actually trained in this group of people to know what a real or fake license looks like? I'm not. I am not. I can tell you right now, I'm not trained. But we as dealers, we think that we're trained. We can look at a license and say, oh, this looks real, or looks a little funny, so maybe it's fake. Nobody has been trained in the auto industry to know what a real driver's license looks like. So you have to have a tool that allows you to figure it out. And it's through algorithms. It's through data, it's through pinging against the DMV, it's through forensic layering to make sure that that document has every single security feature in that document.
There was a question back here.
Yeah.
Does that work on temporary tax, with the temporary license, and that's what we're hearing right now, that it's all being through temporary license?
So a temporary license, you mean a paper license?
Yeah.
Sure. Most states it's paper. I wouldn't ever recommend delivering a car on a paper license. I would say if you don't have another form of identification that you can authenticate, whether it be a state-issued government ID document, a passport card, a passport, I would never, because you can print one off on Word. You can create a Word document. And people, fraudsters, they're getting really good. So they can pretty much do anything. I mean, if they can recreate bank drafts that tell them that they're approved and walk into a dealer and present it as such with an actual approval number, you'd be surprised some of the things that they can do.
Les, let me cue this up for you. Based on the fact pattern we heard a lot of different, I think, issues in there. What kind of advice would you give to the dealer in that situation? What do I do next?
Well, there's a lot of situations, or not a lot, but some situations like yours where the fraud gets detected 2, 3, 4 months down the road, the car's already in another country. And in a lot of cases now, your only hope is just make the police the theft report and get it entered in the system and let them investigate it. Maybe they identify the guy and get him arrested and can force some restitution. You're kind of at that point where everything is historical. The one thing I want to talk about is I've seen it repeatedly where within a week the finance company is letting your F&I guy know that there's an issue. We're not going to fund this because there's the Social Security number might be bad, there's his employment's bad, his proof of income's bad, whatever the reason, they're kicking it back and telling him right away. And then the finance company sits on the information for 2, 3, 4 weeks before finally the sales manager is told and the GM knows, and now they're going to the police and reporting it. And they've let this gap in time go by. And quite frankly, some of it's done because they want their commission at the end of the month. You know, they don't want anything to be backed out before the 30-day mark or whenever that particular employer pays their commission. So there's a stalling tactic among dealer employees sometimes that affects the time frame that car gets entered as stolen. So it's very critical. Time is your enemy. The quicker it's entered as stolen and the quicker somebody starts investigating it, the better chance you have to catch that car, maybe before it's shipped to Africa or something like that. So I would encourage you, have some kind of policy that your employees are required to follow. If you had an employee sit on information 2, 3 weeks and didn't come to the management and tell them there was an issue with this, immediately, then you should be addressing that right away.
So, Bob, let me cue that up for you. What kind of policies and procedures should a dealer put into place to detect this sort of stuff?
Well, when it comes to the vehicle itself, dealers traditionally today will look at a history when they're purchasing a vehicle to purchase the right kind of vehicle. The mistake they make is that's the only one they use. An incident like this, which sometimes takes 2, 3, 4 days, a week to appear and start red flagging, you need to run a current one on the day of the sale. In fact, you should run a current one the moment your consumer's taking it, so that you know that you did your due diligence on knowing exactly what you were offering for sale to the public, right? In the case of Africa, nothing. Once it's there, nothing, right? Not to make something up, but certainly state to state, as a matter of fact, city to city, it catches up quicker than it ever did before. In the days of digital influence, the ability to upload reports, the ability to do any kind of record whatsoever is instantaneous, right? Literally instantaneous. So to answer your question directly, you should have a procedure in place where you follow from the point you obtain that inventory with all the records upon which you obtained it. You should obtain the inventory record when you deliver it. That way you have a complete package of how you acquired the vehicle and then indeed how you sold that vehicle to the public. And with all the records today being date and time stamped, it gives you a lineage that you as a dealer did your due process. And so, most dealers tell us today they'll put one person in charge of that, if you will, as a backlog, as a backstop, passes through or doesn't go. Just that simple, right? So one person, whether it's an inventory manager, doesn't necessarily have to be a direct manager. Could be an inventory person, could be an office person, could be anyone who not sole responsibility, but who has control of this one checks out, it's good to go, or this one doesn't. And really, you have to have a backstop. In the cause of doing business in a daily basis, we're all busy, we're all excited. It's hard to get a dealer not to want to deliver a car, right? Deliver it, we'll figure it out later. Well, with each passing day, that becomes more and more risky, as everyone in the room knows. So the proper answer would be have due diligence, have a process in place, and quite frankly, whoever that backstop is the controller. There is no one that can say, that we don't need to wait. Yeah, you do. Until we're checked off, you need to wait. It's really that simple. Put something in place and stick to it.
Anybody else have any thoughts? What kind of procedures, policies should the dealership have to help minimize this?
I don't know about minimizing it, and essentially what we're talking about here is you guys being sold stolen cars with bad documents, or it maybe even false VINs, or title washing that was done on that car in some other state and then it's brought into yours entitled, and that sort of thing. So anything you take in on trade, anything that you buy from somebody, if you're buying from individuals off the street, you need to check the history on that car and verify the VIN. And I will echo the training point you made. It's not only training for driver's licenses for your buyers that might try to make fraudulent purchases from you. It's also your used car managers, for example, that are going to look at that trade-in, appraise it. They need training on VINs, how to ID that car. Years ago, when I was on a task force, they opened a new CarMax down the street from us. So we went in and gave our business card to the guy, and the manager, he kind of blew us off. But I give him credit because it was like 2 weeks later he called and said, I got a car here, I think something's up with it. We went by, stolen car, altered VINs. And then we started teaching his buyers that bought the cars from individuals what to look for on the car. We didn't make them experts, but we taught them enough that if somebody was selling them a stolen car, and it became just a great relationship where we made plenty of arrests over there with people trying to burn them by selling them bad cars. So you need to look into that history exactly like's being recommended here.
We had a question there.
So to kind of go to your point, I'll keep emphasizing this because I have been in your shoes on the retail side and have sat and have had to go to court and have had to deal with a lot of fraud deals on my end, being in compliance and the finance director for some really large dealer groups. And I too at that point had felt like, well, wow, why is the bank not taking responsibility? They funded the deal, or they bought the deal's approved, so now it should be at some point their responsibility, to your point. But in fact, it's actually backwards. As a dealer, the responsibility of the dealer, when you apply for a banking license, it's your responsibility to comply and adhere to the rules and regulations of that banking license. So you are a bank before you send it to the bank to give you the money. So if you aren't complying with your dealer agreement, it doesn't matter whether it's Fifth Third, it doesn't matter whether it's BMW Financial Services, or if it's Santander, or if it's Westlake Financial Services. They are relying on you as the dealer to authenticate and validate and verify the information, because you have the customer sitting in front of you. All they have is the information that you submit online. They don't know. And sometimes it's too late and it's past that point. So when you have a banking license, you are the bank. You are assigning you have the title of that car, you are assigning that to your customer, and then once it gets approved and it goes to the bank, they're just using the information you've submitted and doing their due diligence. Now, a subprime bank, they might go a step further because maybe it's red flagged in their system, but they're not doing as much. It may appear more because their due diligence is a lot more because they're a subprime lender.
Well, my point is, if that fraudulent customer walked into the bank would pick that up on the matter. They would do their due diligence at the time. So when I said that they should have, shoulder some responsibility, absolutely, because why aren't you doing it? That would be the first thing. That was on the bank side for several years as well. But that was our first thing when the deal came in, was to verify all the information. Including the driver's license, not just insurance, not just payroll, all of that stuff, but the driver's license for the identification of that customer. So that's the first thing when the deal comes in. So they should shoulder some. But I agree that 99% of it falls on the dealer. It's just very hard to tell that story, how do you get around it, what do you do in that case?
Jeff had some thoughts?
I was just going to say, and it's kind of out of my wheelhouse because I don't sit on that side of the business. We're more on the credit card processing, merchant services. But just kind of commonsensical, I would say that, a subprime lender is going to do more due diligence than a non-subprime lender because obviously the person they can't get the prime A credit. So there's a chance for fraud or somebody that, clearly doesn't have a good track record. So you're going to do a little bit more diligence when you're a subprime lender, and that's probably why they are popping up versus, a Bank of America or BMW Financial or whatever it may be.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, so my question is, I have two questions. So the first one is, when you're authenticating a driver's license software, how does that play with common data and social security? Because I see your password having John Smith, who has a valid driver's license, and using another John Smith social security. How's your software going to play with matching real driver's license with common age to social security, and then how does that play with chargebacks? Because those are the chargebacks. Making sure you're taking the proper verification to your credit card.
Sure. So we'll use John Smith because that's a common name and can be easily manipulated in a document. So let's say you're John Smith, and let's say Brandon is John Smith. But Brandon goes in to go buy a car, and he replaces his picture with your picture. Let's say his FICO is 500, or maybe he doesn't even have a social and can't buy a car, but uses your picture on that license. That's still John Smith. Well, using an authentication tool, it's going to catch it through the forensic layering of that document that it's been manipulated. The John Smith is the only correct information on that document, and probably the address because he's going to use your address. But the problem with the document is that picture and all of the security features that are embedded in that picture. Most people don't realize that there's a whole slew of security features around the face of the person's face on that document that are hidden. There's holograms, there's all kinds of embedded security features. So when you go and you duplicate a driver's license, it's going to get caught just based on that fact, because he can't walk in and be John Smith as himself with somebody else's social. That's going to red flag instantaneously if he doesn't have a social security number, if he doesn't have a good credit score. But if you did, does that make sense?
Yeah, but what if he
Well, if it goes through the DMV system and there's a government official that actually will allow that to happen and doesn't do their due diligence, unfortunately, there is nothing in this, no system in place that can protect you against that. If a DMV is actually going to say, hey, I'm going to issue you a document and you're John Smith and you're that person, I mean, nothing in life is foolproof. Nothing's going to be 100%. And unfortunately, neither is the government. We've run into plenty of instances where we've had people who work for the DMV or have cousins or have sisters or somebody, and they pay them a couple grand to issue them real documents. You've got to be diligent enough. In the state of California, for example, there is a DMV database that you can log into and you can see, was this document really created? Well, in that instance, that document really would have been created. You'd have to go through the proper measures, and unfortunately, those might be the one-offs that you get through the system. But it's really few and far between. You'd have to be really gutsy to do something like that.
I think a common theme we're talking about, and all of us that were saying it, it's more of like trying to protect on the front line. So from the credit card processing side, and it goes just to the same things that they're talking about from the identity with the ID side, it's training. I mean, we all run businesses and we all get complacent, and we have salespeople that I call get bonus breath, and they just want to, like we talked about, close the deal. It's the end of the month, hit your numbers, whatever it may be. But we forget to really keep compliance and training and have, whether it's like a quarterly, bring an expert in to teach the front end people that touch a credit card to make sure that they're doing the right things to assure that credit card is not a stolen card, or you're going to be protected in the event of a chargeback. In this scenario, if there is a chargeback and it's true fraud, like 100% fraud to where you stole somebody's ID, there's nothing a dealer can do if it's true fraud. But you can protect it by being ahead of time, catching it ahead of time. In the event there's a chargeback, when it's like friendly fraud, or I took my car in and I wanted a new transmission, and I later say, this isn't exactly, you didn't fix my car properly. If the dealer has a signed sales slip, today, how many of you guys are using the EMV readers versus swiping? Not many?
Chip, you mean?
Chip readers? Yeah, sorry, chip readers. So using a chip reader, getting an ID, getting a signed actual sales invoice for whatever the sale was, and a signed credit card receipt, you're going to win a chargeback 99.9% of the time. If you don't do one of those things, you're going to lose the chargeback. So it goes back to training your salespeople and not just wanting to get that sale or anybody that touches the credit card.
We had a question here.
It's going to be the same. It's exactly the same. So real ID or not, a lot of these states are going to the real IDs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it might have another extra layer of security features, but your old Georgia license still has a number of security features that are specific to that date it was issued, specific to that year, specific to that time. So any manipulation of that document, whether it's 15 years ago or whether it's the real ID now, it doesn't make a difference, because if it's tampered with in any shape or fashion, it's going to catch it. Absolutely. Sure. It's hard. You can't detect it with the naked eye. And if you try, and these fraudsters, they'll pay a couple $100 and they'll send information to China or Japan and get it back, and it's almost perfect. So it doesn't matter to the naked eye what you see. Nobody is really classically trained to get it.
So let me circle back to the idea of training. What would a good training program look like? Bob, do you want to take that?
Yeah, first and foremost, it would be all-inclusive. At the dealership level, we tend to have one person trained on this, and one person looks at that, and if you're a buyer, you're used to looking at this stuff. But if you look at the matrix of an actual car deal, 3, 4, 5 different people have touched that deal along the way. So when it comes to training, whether it be ID training, whether it be history training, it doesn't matter. You should have an all-inclusive for whoever has ability to touch a car deal in your dealership. It doesn't take any longer, doesn't cost any more to train them all than it does to train one. So the more eyes that are educated, the more people that can see something doesn't seem right, doesn't feel like. It could just be from a conversation. You know, we're talking about the person coming in and giving you a fake ID. Well, what if it is a stolen car? And you know, the salesman's talking to the person, and the person lives 10 miles from here, and you know, they love our dealership. I love you guys. That's why I'm here. And anytime a consumer talks like that, our guard gets dropped. And you know, I use you guys for service. And salesmen don't know the difference. It just feels like you're a legit customer. Well, you do a history, and you realize that that car was 3 states away just 2 days ago. Okay, so it should be anyone in your building who takes and touches a car deal. And if you look at the autonomy of a car deal, 3, 4, 5 different people have touched it along the way. So when it comes to education, have one in place, that's step one. Know why you're doing it, that's step two. But make sure as many people as possible are educated in your dealership. Again, anyone that's going to touch that car deal from the beginning to end should be able to be educated to hopefully see red flags and things that just don't add up.
Les, any thoughts on that? What would a good training program look like?
Well, I mean, what it would look like, it would, like if it was for VINs, you could start with history of the VINs, breaking down the VINs. There's probably people in this room that might not even realize what it means when a VIN doesn't conform to VIN standards and things like that. So what I would encourage is through associations like NIADA and state associations and stuff, try to work with them and get them to set up training courses for your title clerks, your buyers that are actually looking at the cars and appraising them before you take them in on trade or purchase them, and your F&I guys, so they could go through ID training. There are driver's license fraud training courses available around the country where somebody will come in and sit down with your staff and basically point out security features and stuff like that on DL. So the tools are out there. It's just a matter of getting together and saying, we got to do this. And as I indicated before, it's not going to get better. It's going to continue to be a thorn in your sides.
I think also having a zero tolerance policy. I think we find most instances you can have a great training program, but it's that one exception to the rule that slips through the cracks because people haven't done the processes the right way. That's going to be your problem deal. And if you don't have a zero tolerance rule in your stores, it's going to get abused every single time, and that's what's going to cause most of the problem. So doing all the training and everything that we've talked about is great, but the implementation and really holding your team and your staff accountable is really most important.
I was going to
Oh, yeah,
to
please
add to
go
that
ahead,
real
Jeff,
quick.
and
I was going to say, I mean, there's two parts of it, right? So there's onboarding somebody. When you onboard an employee, whether they're sales, F&I, whatever it may be, it's the training then. But we all, as business owners, we get lazy. And let's just think about how much do you guys train your salespeople? I mean, they have sales meetings probably every morning, and they're rah-rah meetings. Let's go out. Let's close a big deal. Let's do this and that. And we forget to actually protect our investment. How many cars you lost $40,000 on that car? How many vehicles you have to move to make $40,000? So if you actually put the proper training in place ahead of time and you actually do this, in my recommendation, it's everything we're talking about. It's a full training course. It's bringing an expert in. It's relying on associations. It's and it's having in my opinion, a head trainer at your organization that trains from every person that touches a transaction. And it's quarterly. You're doing it quarterly. So you're doing it on onboarding, and then you're doing it quarterly to refresh people because things change, laws change, fraudsters change. There's more ways to fool us. So I just think it's stop focusing just on the sale, but focusing on protecting your investment as well.
And to add to that, dealers constantly ask, what's the best way to implement that? Do I charge the salesperson back? Do I charge the F&I guy back? I'll tell you right now, peer pressure is a lot stronger than money. Okay? Peer pressure is a lot stronger than money. So whoever let it go through, That's who explains what happened to the entire dealership. That's the person that's doing the next training session on what happened to me and how I screwed up. I promise you, that'll go a lot further than dinging a paycheck. Okay? So just a tip there.
Question? Comment?
Most of us have flown here probably and our ID checks for verification device prior to getting on the plane. So we're all familiar with ID verification. Why is there such a reluctance amongst dealers to implement it in dealerships?
It's money. It goes down to the dollars and cents. I think dealers, whether it's new cars, used cars, it doesn't matter. If you own a dealership, if you're part of a dealership, if you're a dealer principal, if you even own 0.25% in a dealership, it goes down to, we're going to step over those dollars to pick up the penny. In the beginning, there might be a cost to it. And there's going to be a cost, and it's going to seem like a huge cost. But for all those charges that you see, that one car deal, that 2 car deals that you lose, it's going to make it up in the long run. Because on top of that, you're also going to have your A paper that every single time you send good deals in, your bank's going to buy more paper. Whether it's A, B, or C paper, they're going to keep buying it. So that's the problem. Go ahead, Mike.
You talk about costs, and you said that you have $40,000 loss. What was the cost of the
Depending upon what you chose, a couple $100 a month. Up to, call it $500 to $600 a month. Under $20.
So,
Just
Go ahead.
one quick comment is, what's happened over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years is the problem has gotten worse and worse. Years ago, if a fraud got discovered after the loan was funded, they wouldn't force you to buy it back. But it just got to the point where the finance industry basically had been victimized so much that now they basically are forcing dealers to buy them back. So you're in a situation where that $20 that you're talking about, or $200 a month, whatever it equates to, is worth the investment. If you deter one a year, it paid for itself. The other thing is, even if you have insurance that covers this, if you do become the victim of one of these, which a lot of dealers do have, an insurance policy that will cover this if they're the victim. A lot of times you have an escalating deductible on them. So, you might report the first one, but 6 months later, if you get hit again, now your deductible's $5 or $10 grand, and you don't want to even make the insurance claim because then the deductible jumps again. So it becomes an issue for you. The best thing to do, have a good insurance plan and invest that $20 a pop or $200 a month to avoid being a victim of a fraudulent purchase. And then another small investment on a monthly basis, doing history checks on the car will help you avoid maybe becoming the victim of purchasing a bad car. So those two things, I would definitely recommend doing.
So we've talked a little bit about, what expectations the banks have, the finance companies have, and maybe things we want the finance companies to be doing a little bit more of. What should the dealers be looking at as they're shopping around finance companies, looking for new dealer agreements? And Jeff, I'd pose the same question of you. As they're working with their credit card merchant companies, what expectations are the finance companies and banks putting on them? And what are some of the things that they should look for in their dealer agreements to make sure that they're protecting themselves in dealing with this issue?
I'll start from the credit card side. Credit card processors are a commodity. It is what it is. You guys probably get phone calls all the time from credit card processors, but you really want to do business with a credit card processor that is in your industry and understands your industry. They're going to be the ones that are going to fight for you. They're going to be the ones that are going to train you and teach you how to accept credit cards the right way. An automotive industry is much different than a jeweler or a hotel or an eye care doctor or whatever else. So there's different ways to accept credit cards. A lot of people think that, I'm just going to use my bank, or I'm just going to, use the first person that calls me. My advice is you want to use somebody that truly understands this industry and is fully invested into this industry, so they can actually help you from the start, in the beginning, teach you how to do it the right way, and then fight for you if something does happen on the backside.
What we run into is, a lot of credit card processors don't want to be in the buy here, pay here, lease here, pay here industry. I mean, is that common all over, or just one up? I mean, Chase, all the major guys think, I guess they look at you as kind of a pawn shop or something.
Yeah, so it kind of goes into what I was saying, right? So they don't understand the business. You go to a Chase, you go to a Bank of America. It's not their niche. It's not their niche. They don't necessarily understand the business. There's that part of it, right? Because you want to.
You're doing a point of sale transaction just like you'd be doing with Walmart or anything else. You have their card, you have their chip, you have their authorization, and they don't want your process. You're doing anywhere from $100,000 to a couple $100,000 a month, and they don't want your business.
Yeah, because there's a lot of risk involved in the event of a chargeback, A, but B, the bigger thing is that Visa and MasterCard, it's a gray area. You're not supposed to pay debt with debt.
These are paycheck cards. So everyone.
When you say paycheck card, you mean like a prepaid card or something?
You're like direct deposit. No one cuts checks anymore. These are prepaid cards. We're not doing credit card transactions. We're not paying debt with debt. $100,000, maybe $1,000, maybe that isolated. But we don't look at it that way. But they don't want to. They won't even review our business.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why. I've been in this industry for 15 plus years, and I personally couldn't tell you why. I mean, they maybe just don't want that business. It's not the vertical that they want to specialize in, but including myself, and we're not up here plugging each other, but my business would never turn away business, and there's a lot of other credit card processors here that specialize in this industry. I think the point I'm trying to leave with you guys is you want somebody that actually understands this business, because it's just like if my back hurts, I should probably go to a back specialist, not just a general practitioner. If you're going to accept credit cards in the automotive industry, you should do it with somebody that actually understands your business.
Just out of curiosity, so we're subprime, 5-year, 8 years, South Texas. Is anything getting addressed or anything like, at least 70% of our customer base is illegal. So they're not requiring them actually EINs, like most of our IDs. We don't know if they do or not. I mean, it's the demographic. It's like most of us.
So I would just go back to getting some sort of form of documentation, whether it's a visa, whether it's a green card, whether it's a work authorization card. They've got to have something. And if they don't have something that you can authenticate or validate, then you've got to take it a step further and maybe invest in a company that does background checks or something that's going to help protect you. Now, if they're a cash customer and they're paying cash and they're giving you green cash, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's special banks for that charge you, fees that are insane amounts of money. It's a very risky industry, very risky market. Texas is one of my biggest markets as far as clients because you guys get a lot of fraud down there, a ton of fraud. However, you've got to do the best way to do your due diligence is insist on some form of identification from them. They have to have something.
Les, any thoughts on that fact pattern?
One of the things we haven't addressed is some of the red flags. So what you see repeatedly is people who come in to do fraudulent purchases and stuff will come in you close at 9, they walk in at 5 minutes to 8, and they look at a car and they say, that's the car I want, and they want to leave with it by 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Because they know, your salesman's been there all day, your F&I guy's been there all day, and they're rushing through it. Same thing, they'll come in on a Sunday afternoon, an hour or so before you close. So they pick the time they come in. And we've been focusing on, verifying DL, but, proof of employment and, checking that. Then, they may get the DL by you, but proof of employment, they list a phone number where they work, have them list a lot of, it drives me crazy, these application forms that finance companies come up with. There should be a box, physical location of where you physically work, not, not some PO box, or not. Don't let them just enter the name of like Sears, and without a physical location and without a phone number of the location where they actually work. Because if you pick the phone and walk into another room, pick the phone up and call, and it's not Sears, that's an issue, and it's something you can do while the customer's there. Hey, I need a phone number to be able to verify your employment, that sort of thing. Verification of income also. Look for the signs of a phony paycheck stub and that sort of thing. Ask for 3 months instead of just one.
What about proof of residency and utility frauds or whatever?
A phone bill, a power bill, something like that. They didn't walk there also. How did they get there? And a lot you see too is, I'm the guy doing the ID theft, but the mastermind is standing next to me. She created my fraudulent DL for me and created that persona that I'm going to use to buy the car, and she's walking in with me and she's answering all the questions for the F&I guy. So the red flags are often there, and if you keep engaging the customer and asking him some key questions and he can't answer them, hey, stall the deal, do some more vetting. Don't let the guy drive off with the car by any means until you're satisfied.
I have a question in the back.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, we can't hear. There's a microphone right there. It's going to bring back to you.
Yes, I want to talk about the fraud with credit cards, because I think it's costing us more to do fraud after the sale than it is at the time of the sale. So the buy here, pay here. Sorry. Thank you. There's a lot of transactions. In today's, we're making it so easy for customers to go make their payments, whether by text or online or through the IVR. So a lot of payments with the integrations gets a process directly to the account. So there's a lot of automations. What do you think we can do, or what's available out there today for transactions, or to slow down or to minimize the frauds due to payments that's happening after the sale?
Jeff?
Yeah, so we're referring to a buy here, pay here scenario, a monthly payment. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a slippery slope, right? You want to get paid, right? I mean, the finance company, or you're financing in-house, you want to get paid. I'm assuming you're saying because there's a lot of fraud after the payment. I didn't hear the first part of it. But so, with the automation and the software and the technology, there's only a few things you can do. And it's like verifying the address verification and the 3-digit or 4-digit security code on the card. So a lot of these software systems and DMSs just want to kind of skip through that process because it's a little bit extra on the front end. But if you verify that when you're actually accepting the payment in the beginning, and if it's, I'm assuming you're referring to a recurring payment, then I don't want to say it's foolproof, but nothing's foolproof, but that's the best way you can protect it, is actually verifying the address and the CVV code as well.
Not just the recruiting payments, but the regular payments that a customer calls in, goes to the IVR process of payment. They have all the information in the card. 2-3 months later, you get a charge back, and basically you have zero chance to take a shot on that.
Because it's fraud, you're saying, so they're using somebody else's credit card to pay their car payment?
Yes, that's exactly my point.
Yeah, I think, while we all want automation, and I, own a credit card processing / technology company, I'm all about efficiency. I don't think IVR is smart in today's age. I just don't. I think that humanization needs to be there. There's so much fraud that goes on. So, I personally wouldn't even recommend IVR. I wouldn't, if that's how it's happening. I think anytime that somebody's going to go off the course and they're not going to use the card that was first verified, you need to go through a new verification process. You need to get a copy of their ID. You need to get a copy of the credit card, make sure it matches. You need to get, like we just talked about, kind of like a utility bill to verify that the address on the credit card is actually the address that they're living at or whatnot. So, we can all go online right now on Amazon and I can steal, anyone's card and ship a TV to my house. But, doing these things ahead of time and not just having, again, the urge to get the money, but wanting to protect yourself, because we want to be quick and we want to get our money and we want to sell things and we want to get the payment in, but you get burnt for one $600 chargeback, that's a lot. So, or $40,000 loss, that's a lot. What could you do to prevent it? I personally, if it's a new credit card, I would make them go through the verification process to start.
Gus?
So a while back, I was looking at some forms from Rails, and I saw a form that they had where you could actually get someone's fingerprint at the time of sale. This is a while back. So I don't know, is that something that you've ever seen a dealer do? Is that a practice, or is there a reason why dealers shouldn't do that? The law against fingerprints, I think that would probably...
I don't think there's a law against it, but it's the same reason for years. Like, for example, law enforcement has been asking rental companies, hey, get better ID, get a thumbprint, and the response is always, well, we don't want to insult our customers. So for the 1% or 2% of frauds that are going to come through, they don't want to upset the 98% of people that they don't want to insult them by saying, we want your thumbprint. Personally, I don't see it would be a problem, but the finance industry would be against it. The rental car industry, for example, would be against it, and I don't think it'll happen. But it would be a nice thing. And keep in mind, if I'm walking in with a fake driver's license, so I give you my thumbprint, so that's only going to help if it turns out it's a bad transaction, and then the law enforcement can use that thumbprint to at least identify me and hopefully come find me and arrest me. But by then, your car's in Africa, right? So you're kind of, the thumbprint would help after the fact anyway, probably not to deter it, because there's essentially no database in the country that has everybody's thumbprint. It just doesn't exist.
I was going to speak to that as well, though, when it comes to the credit card side. So, there are a lot of clients that we have that do like nightclubs, gentlemen clubs. Like, they do actually, if you're going to spend $5,000-$6,000 at Omnia in Vegas and for bottle service, when they bring you your bill, you're giving them a thumbprint. They're taking a picture of your ID. Because if you try to go and do a chargeback, oh, it wasn't me, I wasn't there. Yeah, that's funny, because I have a picture of your ID and your thumbprint, and that's how you're going to protect yourself. So, I was going to bring that up, so I'm glad the question was posed. That's just on the credit card side. I can't speak to it on the identity theft side, but on a credit card side, it is something that you can do. I don't know if compliance it's against that in this industry, but I can tell you that many other industries are doing that, and that's protecting them from chargebacks.
I'll just say this on the auto side. So in the state of California, and there are some states that do require by law that you get a thumbprint while you're in the F&I process. It may be certain dealer groups, it may be certain states. However, at the end of the day, again, being on the retail side and seeing how these thumbprints are taken from the customers, you have to have it very specific. If it smudges across the front of that document, there's no, and to his point, there's no database in the country that's going to be able to say, hey, that's that person. If it's not a perfect thumbprint, it's really hard to detect. And at the end of the day, there's fraudsters that know exactly how to maneuver around that. So being on the retail side and having gone to court and being asked, hey, did you get a thumbprint? Let me see the thumbprint. And a judge saying, this thumbprint is crap. It's neither here nor there, but Reynolds has it in their library because certain states require it, just as your due diligence, but not really doing anything to help you.
But a question
just
right
real
here.
quick, how many
Yeah.
in this room have been fingerprinted? Yeah, quite a few. But most of the time, you're either fingerprinted to get some kind of license, private investigator license, CCF license, varies from state to state,
Dealer license.
or you're fingerprinted when you're arrested.
So, and ask which ones of those were.
Yeah, we won't ask you which one you were fingerprinted.
Yeah, those of you who raised your hand were
We had a
arrested.
question right here in the back.
Good morning, guys. My name is Omid. I'm with UPIC, and since beginning of this year, we start because of all the fraud is happening. We start using Braintree by PayPal. So pretty much we get all of our payments through them. But unfortunately, one, they're really pricey. They charge us about 3 to 3.5%, and two, as you guys were saying, they're not really familiar with our industry. So I was asking, one, what is you guys' opinion about that gateway? And two, is there any alternative do you guys know that we can use that is lower percentage, more like familiar with our industry, that they can work with us?
Yeah, so I would first ask you a question. Why did you go to Braintree? Because your DMS is integrated to Braintree, or that was just like the easy solution?
That was an easy solution. And we get pre-orders from some of our customers because we have a smaller inventory. So that way we send them to give us deposit, and then that deposit turn out to the down payment. So we'll get to have the money for a little while.
Okay, so yeah, to directly answer your question, it goes back to kind of what I said. It's Braintree I use analogies all the time. It's like, let's say I have dandruff in my hair and I need special shampoo for that. If you walk down a shampoo aisle in the grocery store and you just pick up a normal shampoo, it's probably not the right thing for you. That's what you did when you picked Braintree. I mean, you should be focusing on somebody that understands your industry. Braintree is a publicly traded company. They have to make big margins. They're going to charge more. That's just what it is. There's 4 or 5 credible companies in this industry that actually, specialize in the industry A and are more privately owned, smaller, niche, boutique. They're going to charge you a lot less. You shouldn't be paying that much money. So, again, I'm not going to stand here and plug ourselves, but on the show floor, if you want to walk around the show floor and come by our booth, we can talk about it.
Hey, Les, how do you feel about the shampoo analogy? I'm kind of offended by that person.
I don't know.
Wait, follow up, and then we got one right here.
Our soap's good for this head.
Well, would you name a couple for me so we can start working on it? And does it have enough security like PayPal? Because if there is a fraud, they will give us our money back, so we don't have to deal with that.
In the interest of time, can I have you pose that question to him once we wrap up here? We've got a question here.
So people at the DMV use Texas to see registration, and I know Carfax is great at being able to see what's on there, but is there a tool out there that we could pull up out-of-state DMVs? Is Carfax ever going to get something like that?
Not currently, right? So we have all the connection points
Pull
for
the
every
microphone up, Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have all the connection points for every state, but we don't have that as a service going out. It's on your Carfax Online account. You can go there under the services, and it'll be under there. You'll have all the reference numbers for each state. So if you're dealing with an out-of-state vehicle, you can simply go to that, and it'll give you the connection number directly to their DMV, to the people that handle the dealer side of it. Yeah, and you can call. Yeah.
So, go ahead, Les.
I don't want to plug our product, but there are states out there that have, companies out there like ours that have real-time access to DMV records. So, and we're not the only one in that space. So there are companies out there that can plug you in real-time where they don't buy bulk data. You got to be careful when you're getting DMV records through somebody who is storing bulk data, because they may be buying it weekly or monthly from that DMV, and it might not be up to date. So wherever you go, just make sure you're doing your check to verify that ownership through somebody who's linking into a DMV system real time.
So we're out of time, but before we go, I want to pose a very softball question to each of the panelists as we walk out of here. And then if you have individual questions, please come up. They'll be around here, chat with you afterwards. Softball question. We'll start with Shilpa first, but same question for all of you. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to the dealers as they walk out of here? What should they do?
The one piece of advice is do your research. Do your due diligence. Just don't settle for the first company that sells you a bill of goods. To everybody on this panel, make sure they're in the auto space, they understand the auto space, and sometimes they might charge a little bit more, but make sure you do your due diligence to make sure whoever you're going to hire to do authentication or VIN verifications or merchant services, that you know who you're talking to and they can understand the auto space and help you navigate the process and the training along the way.
I would say the number one thing is, develop a culture in your business where you have policies and procedures and training in effect to try to combat this stuff and keep it up to date. The suggestion was made, do it quarterly. It's crazy. It's mind-boggling to me that dealerships, the bigger dealerships will have like a sales meeting probably every week, right? Daily, every week. And there's multiple opportunities to try to educate your staff and show them, if something happened last week, bring it up at that meeting, go over it, and use it as an opportunity to educate. But policies, procedures, and training, you got to do it.
To piggyback that a little bit, it's an ounce of prevention, and when you're deciding who to do business with, rely on them to lend you the educational piece you need. Okay, you don't want to do it on your own. If you're doing business with the credit card company, ask them who they recommend. Most of those companies have their own, right? That'll come to your business, that'll educate you on what to look for. We certainly have our own. Most companies in the space do. So don't go it alone, but whatever you do, educate as many people as possible in your dealership. Don't pick, that's the person who handles that for us. That's crazy. As many people as possible, have as many eyes on the thing as possible. You'd be amazed what you can catch when you have more than one set of eyes on it. But rely on your business partners for that education. Don't try and figure it out on your own. That's what you're paying them for. That's one of the reasons you're paying them, is for their expertise in that. Let them educate you. Let them help you educate your dealership.
In a card-present environment, make sure that you're using the EMV chip reader. Stop swiping if you're still swiping. Upgrade it, find a credit card processor that can handle that, find a DMS system that can handle that. Liability shifted last year to you. If you swipe a card, you're going to lose the chargeback no matter what. If you dip and insert the card, you're probably going to win the chargeback. So if you're still using old school stuff and you're sliding in a card present, parts, sales, whatever it may be, make sure you have a reader that allows you to dip the credit card into it.
So if any of you had young girls like I did, what I heard was swiper, no swipey. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you for being here. So they'll be up if you want to come and ask them some questions afterwards. Thanks.